I want to caveat what I'm going to say by the reality of anyone who's ever worked on legislation that every deal is contingent. When you make a deal with the other side on something or any group of people, they're always contingent on, you got to see it in writing. Sometimes what you agreed to and what the legislative language that was written says don't align. And oftentimes it's not out of ill intent or anything of that nature. It happens. So I want to make that a point. And I also want to make it a point of saying that because we are dealing with almost with the whole of the economy, as we discuss what we are going to do to help this country through this crisis, and you deal, for example, as we have been with small business, it sometimes interacts with what other parts of the same agreement are also dealing with. So, for example, you might be dealing with a small business sector, but it interacts with what might be happening with the group that's negotiating healthcare spending. And so items like that are things that you're going to continue to work through and have some understanding over. But I think what I feel very confident in saying, as you heard a moment ago from Senator Collins, is that a group of us that were tasked from both sides of the aisle to come up with what we can do to help small business has come up with an understanding of purpose and outline of measures that I feel very confident every member of this body should be able to support when its final version is before you, and which I'm very confident, if God forbid we are not successful in these efforts, it will not be because of what we have produced for this body. And in that endeavor, let me first start by saying that I certainly feel both blessed and fortunate to have had as partners in this obviously Senator Collins, who's been a tremendous contribution that began with her own ideas that we were able to merge with some of the ideas that we had been working on. Senator Cardin, who is someone I've worked with on that committee of small business, but often on issues of foreign policy, and Senator Shaheen, who likewise is a member of the committee, but have also worked with on foreign policy. And I would just say that if people, and because of the nature of the crisis and the isolation that this building finds itself in, a lot of people weren't able to see it. But I think if the average person were to walk in to the conversations that we had, you would have had trouble distinguishing who the Republican and the Democrat was, because I don't mean that from an ideological perspective. I mean it that one of the things that I believe has allowed us to reach this point is that everyone has small businesses in their states, that small businesses are not a partisan item, and that everyone understood that this was not a moment in which there was a Republican side or a Democrat side. This was a moment in which the entire nation was imperiled economically, and we needed to act quickly. So Senator Collins spoke a moment ago and outlined the key provisions and ideas, but I wanted to reiterate some of them because I have a lot of people calling and asking, do they apply? Let me start out with a few things. Number one, small businesses are defined as either some company that has 500 employees or less, or a company who is defined as a small business under the existing SBA criteria, so one or the other. Let me say that covers close to 60 million American jobs and well over 30 million businesses in this country. It's an extraordinary swath. For the first time ever, we've also included most C3s and not-for-profits, C3s, and also independent contractors, people that work on 1099s, gig economy workers who consider themselves a business, even though they have one employee and maybe no real estate that they operate from, but nonetheless consider themselves that. And what it basically does in its simplest terms, and I'm oversimplifying simply because, there are caveats to some of this with formulas and likewise, but by and large, the best way to understand it is as such. You are a business. You're a restaurant, small one-person, one-shop restaurant. You're a dry cleaning shop. You're a mechanic. You have any small business, and you have less than 500 employees or fit the category of the SBA as we define it in this bill. And the government has said people can no longer go to your restaurant or can no longer go out of their homes and use you as their mechanic. And so you've had to lay off your employees. So you're not operating, and you can't pay your employees. I'm not here to make fun of or criticize the big corporations, because I hear a lot of them saying, well, we only have 30 days of credit available, or we have a credit line we can draw down on over the next 15 or 20 days. I'm not saying that's not an urgent thing that needs to be addressed. But what we've been focused on in this part of the bill is the people that have no line of credit, that if they go 2 days without revenue, they're in a lot of problems. And that's the overwhelming majority of small businesses in America. And more importantly, in my mind, the jobs that they represent and support. And so the way this works is you will be allowed, or the program will work this way, you will go to a financial operation, be it a bank or some other lender or credit union, frankly, anyone that Treasury says is okay and wants to participate in this. And you will fill out very simple forms that prove you're a business, that prove you had payroll on a date certain, and you will receive the equivalent of 8 weeks of your payroll that you can prove you had. And you will receive this money very quickly, hopefully, if the system can set up and run. And as long as you use that money on payroll and or rent or lease for the business, it's forgivable. You don't have to pay it back. If you decide to spend it or any portion of it outside of that use, then a year from now it becomes a loan and you will have to pay it back at approximately 4% interest. The Treasury might have a different program that works a little different. And I mention Treasury because we've also given them the flexibility to, in addition to using the existing stable of small business lenders in America today, they will also be able to attract additional lenders to participate under terms that might be different than the current terms, just because we need capacity. One of our biggest concerns about this bill is we're going to have tremendous demand and not enough lender supply, not enough places willing to stand up an operation to quickly process the paperwork and the like. The other important thing to understand is that this is not a program where you're going to the SBA. You're not going to a tent somewhere in a disaster area or some government office or some government website. You are going to a bank, to a financial institution, to a credit union, to a fintech, to someone who will have set up a process and an agreement, either with the existing 7A program or Treasury, to move this paper and get to the intent here is not to create some financial instrument that we can collect loans on. The intent here is what is the fastest way to get this cash into the hands of small business so they can keep the people that work for them employed, so they can rehire maybe some of the people they had to furlough or lay off, and they can keep them on payroll as opposed to going on the unemployment rolls. And the other reason why this is important, number one, is the jobs. Number two is, for a small business, if you lose your employees, if your employees go away because you laid them off, some of them may move away depending on the industry you're in or so forth, if you have to now, you're told, okay, all clear, you have to go out and rehire them or find people to take their place, by the time you get going, it's too late. Many of them will never restart. And we all want this economy to recover, but you can't have the economy recover if you have no economy. And when you're talking about 58 to 60 million jobs and over 30 million potential employers that are impacted by this, it's going to be hard to restart the economy if any significant portion of them can't get going. And we're dealing with some great unknowns. Number one, we've never done this before. We did the very best we could under a tight time frame and difficult circumstances. I am confident that, like any piece of legislation, there are things in it that maybe we have to go back and revisit at some point. Nothing catastrophic, but I just want to say that up front. We've never done it before. But we believe this will work. And what we do know is that we don't try to do this, we do nothing, it's catastrophic. The second point I would make is there's been a lot of people who have worked very hard on this. The staff director on Senator Cardin's part has been sick. Some members of my staff this morning did not come in as well, potentially just to be protective and be cautious. We're talking about a very small group of people that worked basically the last 72 hours straight on the SBA staff, on Senator Collins' staff, on Senator Shaheen's staff, my staff. Just a handful of people worked long hours on legislative draft. I know last night they were here till 3:45 or 4 in the morning, as they were the night before and the night before that. So there's been a tremendous amount of hard work done on this, and we're grateful for it. And I have a product that we're very proud of. And let me just say, it's a product I wish we never had to do. Not because we don't want to help small businesses, but because by and large, every one of these businesses that we're trying to help, we're doing just fine until 2 weeks ago. And that, to me, is the most important point. These are not businesses that were failing or making a mistake, and so government is stepping in to prop them up. These are people that were literally doing fine until they woke up one day and they were told by the mayor, the governor, or someone else, you can't open anymore. You can't operate anymore. People can't come to your store anymore or to your restaurant anymore. And it doesn't just impact the owner. It impacts the people that work for them. And I'll close with this. One of the unique things about small business is that in a small business, the owner of the small business is the president and the CEO but they're oftentimes also the cashier, the stock clerk, the janitor, the driver, the accountant. They're an employee. And an enormous percentage of these small businesses, that small business is not just a place that makes money. It is the life dream and the life work of an individual or a family. And in many of these cases, the people that work for them are not the names and the numbers on a ledger. In many cases, these are human beings that have worked for them for 30 years, whose kids have grown up, them watching their kids grow up, who are like family to them. I've talked to some of these small business owners who have had to inform their employees tearfully that for the first time in 30 or 40 years, they won't be opening and they won't be able to employ an employee. People whose businesses have survived slowdowns, recessions, financial crisis, 9/11. In Florida, they've survived hurricanes, multiple hurricanes, all sorts of natural disasters. Many have been open virtually every day, even the day after these storms in many cases, until now. And the trauma is extraordinary for them. And now imagine the people I know of close friends, people I've known for a long time, who informed me that over a 72-hour period last week, the husband and the wife were laid off, their 2 adult kids were laid off, and the spouses of their 2 adult kids laid off. 6 people, 1 family laid off in a 72-hour period. And so they're sitting at home, everything's closed, they cannot go anywhere, and they don't have a job, and they have no idea when this will end, and when it does, if they even have a job to go back to. That is the story of millions and millions of people that are living through it right now. It isn't what the articles are about. It isn't what the arguing is about. It isn't what all the stories on cable television are about. It isn't what the snarky people on Twitter write about. But it is happening to millions and millions and millions of people. And they're scared, and they're worried, and they're going to get more scared and more worried as the days go by. I will say this. I hope the Senate can act as fast as possible on something beyond just what I've described in our part of this. Because tomorrow morning, all across this country, business owners, big and large, are going to make decisions. People who a week ago were talking about pay freezes and hiring freezes are now talking about layoffs. And maybe a few of them are holding on to see what we do or fail to do. But I caution everyone that if we do not get something done, if we think that we have the luxury and the benefit of time to play games and gamesmanship and bargaining and trying to get a little bit more out of the deal, in a few hours, some important businesses and a lot of small ones are going to make decisions about whether or not they are going to lay off and fire and let go of a bunch of people. We don't know what that number looks like tomorrow morning and in the week to come. Keep that in mind as we decide not just how we're going to vote in a few minutes, but what we're going to do here over the next few hours. We do not have time on our side. We do not have the luxury of time to negotiate. I think this is a process in which there's been a tremendous amount of input. I haven't been involved in all the other sectors, but I can tell you in ours, I'm very proud of the work of all these senators that we've worked with. And obviously, there's always a little bit of tightening you have to do as the language is written. But I believe that when it's all said and done, we will put before the Senate a product that will help millions of small businesses and tens of millions of American workers to be able to continue to draw a paycheck during this very difficult time. And I hope that will earn the support, as it should, of every member of the Senate and then every member of the House. Madam President, I yield the floor.